Just wanted to give a big thank you to everyone listening to this podcast episode. Our sponsor for this episode is Anchor. Anchor is the all-in-one place to record your podcast. And don't worry, it's completely free. It allows you to record straight from your phone or computer. You can also distribute your podcast through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so many more. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm.
This is the Action Filmmaking Decoded podcast. A podcast dedicated to raw action analysis.
Ooh, my gosh. For fans of action cinema out there, how badass would that be?
Each week, we bring you a new action filmmaker to break down your favorite scenes.
360 off person, round kick the guy from a 360 spin.
Now, introducing your hosts, Darren Tunn and Mike Messina.
Welcome, everyone, to the Best of 2020 AFD podcast. This podcast is kind of like the culmination of all the best clips of 2020. We thought this would be a great way for people to either recap on what we've done, or if you're new, just take a look at what we've done in the past and then maybe later check out the rest of the clips.
Maybe later, yeah. I mean, 2020 has definitely been a turbulent year at best. But of course, you can always rely on movies and film to sort of bring you out of that and give you a little bit of escapism. And then this giving you a little glimpse into the making of those, really fantastic. And to be honest, sometimes when you're interviewing people, you get in your own head a little bit. You're thinking too much about what you're going to say next, and you miss out on some of what your guest is saying. So us being able to look back and sort of relive some of the best moments is definitely a cool experience.
That is an amazing point. Before we jump into this episode, though, I would love to give a huge shout out to our editor, Luigi Hernandez. He's been a huge help in helping us produce these episodes. Huge shout out to him on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Luigi.
This podcast, if some of you guys don't know, was started during the start of the coronavirus pandemic. And it was just something that my cousin and I were doing because we were a little bit bored, and we were like, what can we do in this action filmmaking realm that would be cool? And we could just talk to, action filmmakers and just get their insight on things. And it's been amazing to watch this podcast grow and see what it's become.
Yeah, thank you to you and Skylar for starting it. Of course, I came on a couple episodes in. And also big thank you to everyone listening right now, because you guys definitely make the podcast possible for us to be doing week to week, you showing us that support.
Really appreciate it, guys. I believe Skylar also has a quick clip for us. He just wanted to wish you guys happy 2021. And yeah, here's Skylar.
Hello, Action Filmmaking Decoded. This is Skylar Tongue coming back to you from season 1. I haven't been around, but I wanted to drop by to say Happy New Year. It's been a crazy 2020, especially with COVID-19, but just like in action filmmaking, things will turn up and return even better than they were before. I just wanted to say that with what Darren, Mike, and the rest of the team have been doing with the show, I am immensely proud of what it's starting to become, and I hope that it will continue to grow with the passage of time and become even more successful. Again, new viewers, old viewers, welcome. I'm glad that you're here, and thank you for listening to our humble podcast.
All right, guys, so our first clip is with Sam Hargrave. If you don't know Sam is known for his work on all the Avengers movies as a fight coordinator, stunt coordinator, and Captain America's stunt double. We have had the pleasure of interviewing him for Extraction, which is his first directorial debut. Yeah, this was a great first interview.
It was, yeah. It was probably one of the first bigger interviews of the guests that we had on the show. And hearing him in the following clip, he's talking about how in Extraction he was strapped to the front of an ATV rig and doing the camera work himself. So if you ever were wondering what would possess a man to do something like that, here's your explanation coming up.
Definitely a thrill seeker.
Definitely a thrill seeker. And I know we mentioned in the clip, we just ran out of prep time, so I had to do camera work myself. I feel like subconsciously he did not make enough time for himself on purpose to do prep work. So the day of, he could be like, I guess I got to do it now. I guess I got to strap myself to a car and hurl myself down the road at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. And I feel like as an action guy like Sam Hargrave, it's so much fun to do camera.
I'm sure it is. That's a good point too. I'm sure if like you've been doing action your whole life and now you finally have a project that's your baby and you have full control of it, why wouldn't you want to get in there and do some of the nitty-gritty stuff?
Definitely. Yeah. So without further ado, here is Sam Hargrave.
This is an extraction.
So who are the players?
Biggest drug lord in India versus biggest drug lord in Bangladesh.
Some mythic shit, huh?
It's a kidnapping. Drug lord's son. Clock's running at 16 hours. Proof of life as of 6 hours ago.
There was this pretty big car chase sequence in the movie. And I think a lot of us saw the behind the scenes where you were strapped up to this big camera rig. I'm just wondering, just curious, like, what did that camera rig actually consist of, where you were strapped onto that vehicle?
Yeah.
And was it like custom built? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the idea, once we decided to shoot the entire chase, both foot chase, car chase, hand to hand, all these things we wanted to do, this entire sequence handheld, then we set about devising the best way to do that. And so it's a little more self-explanatory when it's fighting and running. It's handheld and you hold the camera and you run and walk and move it to follow the action. When it was time to do the car chase, how do you get a handheld feel while being able to keep up with vehicles? Like, I can't run that fast. So how do you execute this? So we found these, based on these camera vehicles that my brother, Daniel Hargrave, had in Georgia, these kind of UTVs, these utility terrain vehicles, or these ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, that can go in lots of places through dirt, mud, rocks, but also on the street. We kind of modeled this camera car after that and put, both front and side mounts or plates where I could stand and be hooked in. We made a nest, if you will, like a camera nest where I could move around comfortably but be hooked in safely. And then, because we knew we were going to be leading the cars through certain things, we are going to be tracking with them and chasing them. So we just set up the camera car in all those different positions. But it kind of, I became the arm of a camera car. I would go, and the thing that I liked about that, not only was it staying true to the style that we wanted to express for that sequence, it allowed me as the director, but also operating and stunt person, to react to situations as they unfolded. So I didn't have to communicate through, to the DP, then to the camera operator and say, hey, do this moment. If I felt something happening, like if I saw, in a fight scene, Chris take a stumble back here and he didn't hit his mark, I could know, okay, they're going to keep going. So I would shift my weight and try to keep going and not lose the sequence, So sometimes if the marks aren't hit, people give up on it. They go, cut, we didn't hit it, let's start again. Whereas I felt like I could save a lot of moments and sequences by understanding how the action was going to happen and reacting based on my many years of being, in front of the camera and seeing stunts and designing them. So that was part of my reasoning, was just put myself there to just hopefully make the process smoother and capture stuff exactly how I wanted to, without having to, explain it or rely on someone else to capture it. And there was the danger element. I didn't feel comfortable putting, camera operators who that's what they do. There's some of these guys that we got, especially the ones we got, were some of the best in the world. And they could totally do the stuff I did with enough rehearsal. We just, one, didn't have the time, and two, some of those things were really dangerous. I mean, there were times when, there were speeding cars going by my feet, like this, passing 6 inches in front of my legs at 30 miles an hour. And if something went wrong, for whatever reason, I felt better about it being me in that spot than other people.
So our next clip is from Tyler Whitty. He worked on Extraction with Sam Hargrave, and he's also had some other stunts under his belt, like the Black Panther movie, and he's done a couple other little things, but those are the main ones that he's done.
Talking about that collaboration that's required for safely putting someone into a crashing car. I guess for all car accidents, it would help if you had a whole team on standby, right?
Yeah, and obviously wear your seatbelt.
Of course.
So this is a clip from Tyler Whitty about how he prepared for his stunt in Black Panther.
What happens now determines what happens. to the rest of the world.
I remember you also told me that you did a car crash sequence in Black Panther. Do you have like a process when performing car crash sequences, especially like the one where you're in the truck during extraction? Like, how do you make sure nothing goes wrong in those situations? Like, is there like a mental preparation for those kinds of stunts?
Yeah, I think we can kind of go back to the kind of what we said before about just really double checking all of your safety precautions.
Right.
I think for me, having a background in the motorsports side of things, and being a fabricator myself, I know what to look for with the roll cage. Is it built out of the proper material? Do the welds look good? Making sure your seatbelt is set up properly. That's another huge one. And then, once you kind of get all that, then you're just, you kind of just put yourself in the zone, and, that, you need to hit, this car at exactly this point, or, this ramp at this point, or, whatever it is you have to do, once you've kind of gone through those safety precautions, you just do it. And, they build the cages for the car. And if they're going to put like, a cannon in the car, if they're doing a pipe ramp, they kind of, the effects department will kind of take care of that, and you'll have the stunt coordinator and driver, everyone kind of come together in like a collaborative effort to look at the car and, design these cages or pipe ramps or cannons. And everyone just works together to build these cages, and, proper seat, and, making sure you have a helmet and a neck restraint and safety belts. And it's all in like it's all kind of like the pre-production on that.
Gotcha.
The next clip we have is from Mike Moe. Mike played Bruce Lee in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and he was a pleasure to have on the podcast.
Do you know how many times I've tried to perfect my Bruce Lee impersonation, and then Mike Moe comes around and he's being paid a bunch of money to do that on screen? Like, if it were me, I would have paid Quentin Tarantino however little money I have to portray Bruce Lee in just about anything. It could be on a cereal box or something.
Yeah, and I think he was saying like it was just kind of like a dream come true for him, just because he's been doing this all his life.
Yeah, and studying martial arts. I think Skylar mentioned method acting. It's basically preparing for a role your entire life as a martial artist, as someone who idolizes this man. And talking about the great thing about Bruce Lee himself is that he has that simple, clean philosophy with being water. It means 1,000 different things, and he really lived it through and through. JKD, Jeet Kune Do, that you touch upon in this clip as well. Perfect embodiment of that.
Yeah, and the last thing I thought was super funny about this clip was Mike's slow transformation into Bruce Lee, and then his family members and friends were slowly realizing it around him. I just thought that was hilarious. But yeah, without further ado, here is the Mike Moe clip.
Now, I admire Cassius Clay, I do. What I admire is, in his sport, there's an element of true combat. When Cassius Clay meets Sonny Liston in the ring, that's not two athletes posturing. That's combat. Two men trying to kill each other right now. If you don't beat him, he kills you. That's beyond athletics. That's beyond wide world of sports, That's two warriors engaged in combat. That's what I admire.
In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you really captured Bruce Lee's likeness very well, especially with his mannerisms, his body language, even his accent. Was there any particular source material that stood out to you when you tried to study how to play Bruce Lee?
Well, with your compliment, you just earned yourself 4 more hours of podcasting. No, just kidding.
Oh, no.
I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate the compliment. For me, I don't know if you guys remember that. There's always clips of it online, but he did this long form interview on black and white film, the Pierre Berton show. And that's like a 30-minute interview where I think that's the one that I downloaded to my phone, and I had always in my ear, my AirPods, just preparing for the role for months on end, from the audition process all the way up to like the day before I filmed. So that is, if you're surrounded by something enough, it starts to become you a little bit. And I remember exactly, and I even remember having some of my students, because up to that point I was, still teaching, regularly, and some of my students were starting to question, like, because I didn't tell them what was going on, and they were like, "Wow, your hair is getting really long, and your cadence when you're teaching is sounding different." And I wasn't doing it on purpose. I was just starting to become Bruce in certain ways.
Right.
So for me, it was just exactly. It was a little bit of method acting and just immersing myself. And for me, that sometimes it can be arduous to really get into a character, especially if you don't really connect with them. I had no problem jumping into Bruce just because I'm such a fan. So for me, it wasn't work. It was just an exciting way to prep for something that I've been dreaming of and kind of hoping for, I don't know, ever since I was 12.
I saw there was some actually like behind the scenes footage of you and Brad Pitt training. What was it actually like to fight Brad Pitt in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I became kind of like, I was always a fan of Brad, and I know how many movies. I think he's kind of like underrated, not anymore, but I think he's kind of underappreciated for what types of films and the choices he made and what kind of characters he played. I think so many people just dismiss him as just like this hunky A-list type of celebrity. But when you when you really get to look at his work, and especially when you get to work with him, I just developed this affinity for how he's been able to keep it all together with so much time in the spotlight and being at the top of his game. He's and the only way you can do that, I think, in Hollywood for that long is to actually be like a good person. You can't hide who you are for that long. I mean, this guy is just, he walks the walk, he talks the talk. He doesn't even talk the talk. He's genuine. He's down to earth. He never felt anybody. He never made anybody feel like they were lesser. And I remember like the second or third day on set with him, we were just sitting, and we must have been tired from, banging wrists with the fight choreography. And I told him, I was like, "Hey man, I really appreciate you welcoming me to the set, with open arms, and making me
That's
feel
awesome.
like one of you guys, because, there's Kurt Russell, there's Quentin Tarantino, there's Brad Pitt, and then who's this guy, So yeah, for me, that was huge. That kind of opened up my performance because I felt relaxed. I felt welcome. I felt
You gave you confidence in a way.
Absolutely.
For Brad Pitt and I guess the motivation it gave you, how did you find the confidence to be able to portray Bruce Lee?
I think I was a little naive. Like, I was just excited that finally, after so many years of near misses and just wanting to be able to play this type of role, not even just Bruce, but to be able to showcase what my skills as a performer are. And I knew I only had one scene that was long enough to really make an effect on the film. And I decided right away when I started auditioning, I was like, well, if I only have this small cameo, I'm going to make sure it's memorable, and I'm going to make sure it captures Bruce's magnetism and his charisma. And that was my goal. I've seen so many other Bruce Lee interpretations, and I'm a huge fan of Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, as inaccurate as it might be. I feel like that was one of like the first superhero origin movies. You know what I'm saying? So that, yeah, for me, it was easy to prepare. What was tough was just dealing with the expectations after I had filmed. I didn't realize how heavy, it was. You don't realize that when you play Bruce Lee, you're not playing a guy, you're playing a god. You're playing a legend in many people's eyes. So it's very hard. And as you guys know, I'm sure you guys heard all of the noise, but it's like, you can't please everybody. So I'm glad that I didn't really put that pressure on myself before. And I was naive, and I just went in. I was like, I'm gonna make Bruce badass. I want to make him fun. I want to make him funny. I want to make him, smart, and just capture that energy that you guys talked about. That thin line between cockiness and confidence that he wrote so well.
Let's stay on Bruce Lee, and let's talk about Jeet Kune Do.
Right.
We know that you study a little bit of Jeet Kune Do, and though it's the child of multiple martial arts, mainly Wing Chun, it's usually known as a philosophy with guiding ideas. So we wanted to ask, how does one really learn Jeet Kune Do? Is it more body and techniques, or is it more thought and mind?
I think it's, I was talking to somebody about this not too long ago. Jeet Kune Do was tailor made by Bruce for Bruce. The movements and the style was tailor made so he could take different things from different arts and his own training and apply it against somebody that was bigger, stronger, faster than him. That's not going to work for everybody. So for me, I think Jeet Kune Do is how can you, as a person, as a martial artist of your own, how can you take your own personal experience in martial art, whatever art that may be, and apply that with taking in other people's thoughts and morphing them to your body style or your attributes, kind of like a video game. So for me, I think of Jeet Kune Do as like a personal conquest to improve yourself by being open to other things. And obviously he's got an art form that has the technical things in that. And I don't really know that. I'm still a white belt when it comes to the technical aspect. But the thing that really drove my training was this thought that in Jeet Kune Do, Bruce was always pushing forward. And if there was an obstacle, your goal is to remove the obstacle so you can keep pushing forward, whether that's in footwork or, the jisao, just whatever it is. And that mental pursuit and that kind of helped my acting as well. That's what Bruce did in his life. If there was an obstacle, whether it's racism or just bias against certain things in his movie career, he would do whatever he needed to do to remove it or bust through it and then keep moving forward towards his goals. And, this guy was a man on a mission. And as we can all attest to right now, he's left his legacy.
The next clip we have here is Michael Lear. He is the second Michael podcast that we've had in a row. Michael Lear was an amazing guy to talk to. He's been known for works such as Gemini Man. He worked on Extraction as the fight coordinator with Sam Hargrave. He's working on Fast 9 now. He's worked on Mulan, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it was really cool with that adoptee connection with me and Michael, because we're both Asian American adoptees. Really cool topic of conversation there too.
Yeah, and he's just such a down-to-earth guy. And it's amazing to hear him talk about these roles like John Wick 3. That's what this clip is about. And talking about Keanu, just reaffirming that Keanu is the amazing guy that we know that he is.
Yeah, super cool guy. And, anyone who uses the term nerdgasm in a genuine sense is someone I want to talk to.
Yeah, so without further ado, here is Michael Lear.
Mr. Wick broke the rules. I trust you understand the repercussions if he survives.
John Wick, excommunicado, is now in effect. You shouldn't be here.
What was your experience like filming this scene?
Yeah, so my story with the John Wick series actually starts quite a bit beforehand. I worked on the second film, and I was one of Keanu's main training partners, I would say, for the beginning of when we first started prepping him. I mentioned Justin Yu earlier in the podcast. He and another guy, Eric Brown, both good friends of mine, both great fight stunt coordinators. We'd worked in Bollywood on a film in 2014. That's where I got to know them. And then they had worked extensively on the first John Wick film, which came out while we were in India. So when we came back from India, they were already thinking about doing the second one, or they're starting to go on prep for it. And so during the summer, they called me in to come be one of Keanu's training partners. Especially Keanu's really tall, so we just need kind of taller martial arts guys to come in and do it. I'm like a near 6 foot myself, so yeah. When we were training in there, I think they were trying to find a spot that they could fit me in. We ended up doing a fight scene, Keanu and I, that got cut from the film for various reasons. There's a lot of stuff that got cut from those movies, lots and lots, especially action stuff, because they're chock full of things. And I never got the chance to see it, but I heard that they replaced it with another scene that I thought was just fantastic. So I have no qualms about it. I still got paid. I still had a great time. And at that point in time, that's when I started really training over at 8711, and taking Chad Stahelski's class and stuff. He at the time he was doing a sort of a training thing for a lot of the people that were going to be involved in it. And that kind of continued all the way through when John Wick 3 was happening. I was actually working on a film, Gemini Man, at the time that they were starting with it, and I couldn't come out to John Wick 3. They wanted me on, I think, to be one of the nondescript kind of core guys, just also be there to help train and do what I'd been doing before. but I was already on another production. Eventually I ended up getting out there. They were like, hey, we want you to come in and do like a fight sequence. And I thought it was like the same as before, where it was, you're going to show up, you're going to do like maybe, I don't know, you'll be one of like 5 guys who run in and get shot. And that'll be that. And then I was like, okay, cool. And then I found out that I was going to be one of like Mark Dacascos' henchmen. And like, wait, so how much of this movie are we in? Like, we're just in it like for like one sequence, right? And it turned out to be just a very like, not in a bad way. It was such a gift that it was such, that we were able to do so much work on that film as like sort of his shinobis and what have you. And I was like, this is cool. Like, we're modern day like ninjas. Like, I love this. This is such a like nerdgasm for me, just being an action film martial arts fan. And yeah, it's cool because something like that film, like the John Wick series, it innovated a lot of stuff, right? It's like 2014 when it came out, it changed the way we look at action. We're living in the John Wick era right now as far as what we expect from actors to be able to perform. We expect a lot out of like the gun work, we expect a lot out of like the martial arts. Like you saw a huge explosion of like judo and jujitsu techniques in movies afterwards, as a result of John Wick. I firmly believe that. The same way that The Matrix caused bullet time to appear, the same way that, after Ong Bak, we all wanted to do like a bunch of like really brutal stunts, the same way that Bourne Identity made everything, like a Kali fest with like some shaky cameras and stuff, but like, yeah, as much as people will complain about the shaky cam for something like that, there are a lot of really great innovations that those movies all gave us, and we lived in their eras for a short time afterwards. And right now, that's what the John Wick series has done for us. So something like John Wick 2 and John Wick 3, if you've already changed the landscape, now you're given the task of upping yourself. And, 8711 is one of the top stunt teams in the world as far as, and as far as action design, they're just the time and the energy and the thought that they put into it. All those guys are very smart. They're very cerebral, and they really understand filmmaking just as much as they understand stunt work. So when we were working on the third movie, it was really cool to see kind of the new ways they're going to innovate it, what they're going to attempt. Obviously, that one of the first things I came to help out with was that the motorcycle chase, and we were just learning how can you do this on a green screen, And so I didn't end up being in the sequence on the day when they were doing it. They were actually shooting at the exact same time we were shooting the glass house fights upstairs, and then. But the process of building that together, that's such a laborious task. And it's an homage to The Villainous, which is like a really cool movie that had done a version of it. And then they were like, yeah, but what can we do to sort of like honor that and then take it a step further? And that's kind of the mantra that I feel like they work on a lot of the time. There's only so many things you can do, but you are in charge of always innovating things and making it fresh. And really pushing the barrier. That's why some of the biggest stunts and some of the biggest sequences have come out of that movie. That's why that series is legendary at this point in time. It's made Keanu like a meme again, which is amazing. And he deserves it because he's one of the coolest guys. I found that out back in 2015 when I worked with him. He's such a chill, nice guy, and he's got such a great sense of humor, and he really does care about everybody else almost more than he cares about himself. There was a part in John Wick 3 I remember where like my timing was off, my positioning was off, because again, you're doing this thing where like that's not a VFX me coming out of the glass. I'm literally just hidden behind this very reflective set where you almost can't see. Like once they turn the lights on, you're sort of blind. We actually would constantly run into glass walls all the time walking around that set. Like, hey, I got to go grab a cup of coffee, and then you're like, all right, just be back in 5 minutes. Right. You go to turn around and smack you, running right into it. You're like, oh, wait, hang on. And you would see it. Everyone would come up to what they knew was part of a wall, and they carefully put their hand forward to make sure it went through. And even then, once they knew that their hand was through it, they would gingerly step across the threshold as if they were expecting to run into a wall. Everyone at one point in time,
one of those mirror mazes.
It's crazy. It's a gigantic infinity mirror in every direction. That's like that whole set. So then doing a fight sequence, like there was a take where I was really off on my timing and stuff, and it just looked horrible. And they called it out. They're like, hey, do this, do that. Like, hey, just watch your timing. Your timing was off. And Keanu was like, no, it was me. Like, don't, it was my bad. And I'm like, I don't know if he was bluffing or if he was just trying to cover for me or if he legitimately thought that something was his fault. I don't think it was. I think it was my fault. But, the fact that he tried to make sure that no one was getting blamed falsely, and that he had no problems like being the guy that, was like, hey, it's my mess up. Yeah. Like he's just one of those very earnest, very open, personalities, which I thought was really cool, and I didn't even know if he'd remember me or not from the first time that we fought. And he, we were getting into that, we did the first take of that first shot of the fight. And afterwards we were already sweaty because it was just a lot of action for one take. And as he's going to check the monitors, he's all like, round 2, huh, Mikey? And I was like, oh, man, he remembers. Like, he remembers our first fight. So I was like, that's really cool, And I don't know why he wouldn't have remembered it. It's just, he's a big celebrity, and I don't know what would have been memorable about me ever. So, but yeah, he's very, very cool and very, very, very polite. And yeah, just a joy to work with. Basically what I'm saying is everything you've heard about him is true. He's amazing.
Our next clip here is with Wade Eastwood. He's been known for a lot of things, mainly for working with Tom Cruise on Edge of Tomorrow and the Mission Impossible series. But this clip was about the halo jump from the last Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah, one of the dopest scenes in pretty much all of stunt work, talking about how to jump out of a plane multiple times a day to record a one-take action scene. Just as insane as it sounds, I would say.
Yeah, this is just one of those sequences that it's almost unbelievable. Like, you can't believe that it's real. And I remember when my family first saw it, my dad was like, this has to be green screen, right? This has to be green screen. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, it's not green screen. They did this for real.
Definitely.
Yeah. So without further ado, here's Wade Eastwood.
We gotta talk. Need to rethink this. Out of my way, Hunt. Walker, we got a problem. There's a storm and we need enough talk. I'll see you in Paris.
A specific scene for Mission Impossible. So you have that big halo jump sequence jumping out of a plane.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was definitely a lot of prep work for that, partly because there was only a certain amount of daylight you could use for that one shot per day. I also know you guys were jumping out of a plane, so that probably took a lot of prep work. What was the process for that, for designing it and executing it?
Yeah, so that sequence came about because we wanted to work out how to land in Paris. And we're like, how do we get into Paris?
Yeah.
Oh, train, come across through a border point. We just need something more in this movie. And Tom's like, let's pretend we're a commercial airliner. And I'm like, can I do a jump from commercial airline height, like 30,000 feet? Like, let's go do a halo.
Right.
We're like, yeah. So no actors, ever done that for real. Done it in wind tunnels and stuff. So what's the process with everything else we had to do? Don't forget, we got to do car stuff, fight stuff, normal shooting, drama, and all that sort of stuff. So we built this massive wind tunnel, the largest wind tunnel in the world, outdoor wind tunnel in the world. And every day in between setups, like, okay, I have half an hour to change the lighting on stage. Wait, meet me in the tunnel. We'd jump down to the tunnel with my skydive team. And we would just practice in the tunnel, practice moves. And we built the previs with McHugh. And, this would be cool. That would be cool. How do we keep this as a one-off? It's too cutty. We don't want cutty because we're not cheating the audience. We're going to be doing it for real. So
right.
We're not doing it in a wind tunnel. So we've got to make this a one-off. So we would mock up the plane ramp and how do we come around with all the things on the floor? We've got to smooth the floor so the camera guy can walk around without tripping. And we started building it. And then it was a case of we want it at that sort of magic hour of light where we're falling into darkness. Okay, so we can only shoot that maybe first in the morning and at night. Okay, at night we can get one jump by the time we've oxygenated up to the right altitude, pressure altitude and all that. Okay, so we're going to do one a day on that time. I'm going to do 4 training jumps before. We may be able to get away with 2. Okay, we can get 2. Now it's like, while we're doing it slightly dark, we need to have a halo helmet. And they all had these massive oxygen, like a fighter pilot, which covered your face. And so all you see is Tom's eyes. So it's like very difficult to A, know it's him, and B, to show the emotion and the panic. And
right.
Again, that sort of thing where he's just dived in and now he's like, oh shit, I don't know how to do this. But I've got to. So he, so we had to see his face. So we got a helmet that I'd been using in the tunnel and skydiving. And we said, okay, can we make this pressurized? So my skydive guy, Alan, he got with another guy. He's amazing at all the rigging in the air as well. And we managed to make the helmet pressurized so that we could actually jump it, oxygen built in with a big glass face. Like, great. So we go and do some test jumps. My team went off and test jumped it, and I think Norway that we went to in the end. It's like, all right, but now we need to do it at dusk. Well, I can't see your face. Now we're going to put lights in it. But the lights, if they break and go oxygenate like that, they basically would blow up in flames. So we'd have Tom Cruise's face on fire at 25,000 feet.
Right. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
So it's not a good thing. So this was weeks into months of no lighting system can sustain that. No, this can't happen. So we eventually got it to a point where after a lot of testing at altitude, we got it to a safe place. And then, Tom just banged out the jumps. He was just jumping. He would sometimes take off from the studio after a shot.
Wow.
Get in a helicopter, take off from the studio, have his rig on him, get changed in his trailer, have his rig on him, fly to the drop zone, jump out the chopper above the drop zone so he didn't waste time landing and having brief. He was with the guys in the chopper. Right. So no, we'll go straight from the literally take off from a drama scene, land, jump out the helicopter, land at the drop zone, go and do it again. We're running out of lights, so I can get 3 jumps in tonight, 5 jumps tomorrow. Yeah, he's just very dedicated, and that's how we got it done.
Yeah, he definitely sounds like he would even enjoy it doing it, like even if it wasn't like a movie being filmed.
Yeah, you
like just on a regular basis.
On a weekend, he's always like, "Come, let's go for a motorbike ride. Let's go do some motocross. Let's go for a skydive. Let's just do something." It's like, if he's not really busy, in post production on something else, or mixing, or creating, or developing something, which he's hugely busy doing. But when he gets out, and him and I just train, like we've been doing a lot of training on this movie in different countries, he's in his element. When he's just sitting in a grass field with nothing around him, just the boys, and we got our rigs out or whatever we're doing, and we just or bikes out, and we just mountain bike, whatever we're doing, and he's just like, he is 100% in his element.
Sounds like Ethan Hunt.
Yeah. He's easy to create for, because I think of every situation as if, what would I do, and what would Tom do? So you're creating for a real person and a real guy that's quite capable. You just Hollywoodizing it slightly and stretching it to make it more visual and more fantastic. But the basis is all there already.
Right, of course. This next clip is with Scott Adkins. If you don't know his name already, he's been in so many films like Legacy of Lies, Ip Man 4, Boyka, Avengement, Accident Man. So many great films. This was just a crazy interview to do.
Yeah, the man is a legend. He is definitely one of those huge names in action movie royalty. I remember we talked to one of our Kung Fu friends about, we're interviewing Scott. Is there anything you want to ask him? Do you know who this guy is? And he's like, I'm a martial artist. Of course I know who Scott Adkins is.
Yeah, he's definitely known. But this clip in particular, I loved how he was talking about working with Donnie Yen and how he accidentally kicked Donnie Yen, which was just crazy. And I thought that was just a funny story.
Probably the only thing more dangerous than getting kicked in the throat is accidentally kicking Donnie Yen in the throat. But Scott is still alive and well, so things must have went over well between him and Donnie.
Yeah, we've all seen that Ip Man clip of Donnie, the 1v10. Clip where he destroys everyone,
and here Scott is still standing, so he's worth it.
Scott is still standing. Awesome. Well, without further ado, here is the clip with Scott Adkins.
Is that it? Huh? Is that all you got? You see that? You're nothing but another little yellow chink. Come on!
So I know Ip Man 4, huge blockbuster film. You're starring as the villain there. I know you mentioned, of course, your character Geddes, his whole thing is karate, defending, the style of karate. But I also see a bunch of other styles like wrestling being a big factor in the fighting style there. At what point in the process were those influences added in to the karate base?
Yeah, listen, it's kind of weird that my character's really racist, but yet he's choosing a Japanese martial art over an American one. Really, you should have been like a wrestler, boxer. So they wanted it to be karate, and we were rehearsing for 10 days before I actually did anything. And I have to tell you that everything we rehearsed was not in the film. I think they were just trying to figure out whether I could do it or not. And then they just changed the choreography on the day. That's the way they do it in China. I still struggle to understand why, but that is the way they do it. But it kind of evolved into more of a Western style of fighting. I'm not going to say what I wanted to do on Ip Man 4 was learn as much as I could from the best guy to ever do it, in my opinion, Yuen Woo Ping, when he's at his best, less wires, I think he is the very best. So I didn't want to tell him what he should do. Whatever he said to me, I wanted to please him. But I certainly would have gone with more of a Western sort of style for my character. And I did say a little bit of that. So I think it evolved into that as we went along.
There was a little bit of that in there.
He was less karate. I was doing a bit of karate with the poses and stuff, but it would go less.
Yeah, definitely. And it definitely stands out when you're going from these kicks and strikes to all of a sudden you just body locks Donnie Yen and then you're just throwing him on the floor. It made for a dynamic fight, I think, definitely. Darren mentioned to me something about hearing stories about Donnie Yen not trying to hurt people, but actually punching people and making contact with them and saying crazy stuff like, hey, I'll give you a couple extra bucks if you let me punch you in the face. Did anything like that happen when you were filming?
I didn't get a couple of extra bucks, but I did get punched in the face.
So now he's evolved to making people do it for free now.
Donnie was great with me, and I've heard all the stories about Donnie. And apparently, in his younger years, he was a bit of a tyrant. That's what I've heard. But that was not my experience. He was great with me. He's very demanding, of course. I mean, of course he's going to be, because that's how you become as good as that. I think why he wanted me was for what we were talking about with the operators. He wanted someone to fight against that's going to be able to get it done in a few takes, because you don't want to be doing take after take after take, especially when you've been doing it all your life and you're in your 50s. Like, come on. So, but sometimes, and we're working with the best of the best, and I'm really good, but I could see that I still had such a lot to learn. And there were times when, didn't get the first take, didn't get the second, didn't get the third. And I could feel his frustration. I could feel Donnie's frustration, and I could see the old Donnie might come out. So I did get a bit stressed sometimes. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he blamed me when it was his fault sometimes. But anyway, it's all cool. It's all good. Yeah. But, it's hard. It's hard going out to China and doing it the way they do it. Right. It is hard work. And yes, I had to take a kick to the face and a punch to the face, put a gum shield in and just take it. It was fine. It wasn't that hard. There was one move, and it's in the movie. I kicked Donnie in the throat. I was meant to kick him in the chest, but I actually accidentally kicked him in the throat, and he wasn't happy. So he hits me in the face, and then I go back and I kick him in the throat, and he was saying, come on, you got to do it quick. You got to do it quicker. So on the third take, I accidentally kicked him in the throat. And so they said, okay, but there was still a pause in between him hitting me and me kicking him. So he said, we'll change the angle, and we'll do the punch in the face, and then we'll cut to the kick. And I was thinking, oh man, he's going to hit me now. He's going to hit me hard. He's going to get his own back. But it was absolutely fine.
Get his revenge.
No, he did.
Like you say,
he was a gentleman.
Pain is temporary, and film is forever, I think, like you like to say.
That's the one.
All right. So our next clip is with Tom Struthers. This was actually a crazy interview. If you don't know Tom already, Tom has done a lot of stuff with Christopher Nolan, the Dark Knight series, Inception, X-Men First Class, just a whole bunch of stuff. And this was just such a fun interview to do.
Yeah, in this particular clip, he's talking about that opening plane sequence in Dark Knight Rises with Bane and everyone jumping out of a plane midair. When you have a crew that's ex-special forces and that's required to pull off whatever it is that you're filming, it's an especially badass sequence.
Oh, yeah. And I loved hearing about the opening sequence of The Dark Knight and that bank robbery sequence. That was just crazy. Something that I'd never thought I would hear in my lifetime.
Yeah, such seminal films in the comic book genre, and really formative films for my childhood as well, to be honest.
And one last thing I want to mention, this was Tom's first ever interview, because he doesn't actually do interviews.
He did it for us. He made an exception.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, without further ado, here is Tom Struthers.
When Gotham is ashes, you have my permission to die.
I actually wanted to get a little bit into that first stunt within the Dark Knight trilogy, the second film in particular. And I know you were one of the guys actually on the wire in the bank robbery scene. And I was kind of wondering, what was that experience like planning that out?
I have a very, I was very lucky enough to have a very good background in wire work because of working for Simon Cranes for so many years and being quite practical. So I've rigged a lot of different wire gags and stuff like that. And I got to perform quite a lot on wires in my career when I was younger, and on like Vertical Limit and Tomb Raiders and Private Ryan and projects like that, being on the end of getting blown up or flying through the air and stuff like that. So yeah, it's great. I mean, I always loved it. And it's also the aspect of technically getting something ready and figuring out a way to do something so the body, because when you're on the end of that wire, it puts you physically in the space you need to be in, whether it's flying or throwing you or dropping you. It's then up to you to do your part, the drama part, the physical drama. So yeah, I loved it. And we're very lucky. I think the most challenging wire rigs and gags, what they call them gags, the stunt side of it, on all three of the Batmans, was on the last one. I remember in the conversations, and Chris was like, we might have to go CG here, Tom, because we want to have 4 people out the back of a C-130 or big aircraft. Right. And I was like, give me a day or so to think about this and call, some friends of mine and people I know. And I was like, no, we can do this for real. It's are you serious? I was like, it's never been done, but I know I can do it. And it's like, okay, it's not an open checkbook, but show proof of concept. So that's what we did. And, and it's in the movie, so that's a good thing. And, so.
Yeah, I actually heard you actually had 8 days allocated to pulling that stunt off, and you actually pulled it off in just 2.5 days. I'm actually kind of wondering what the planning process was like, and how did you do it so efficiently?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to also the rest of your department's camera, director, things like that. We had 8 days prep for this, and we were only going to fly one. Let's call them one mission a day, and weather. We had weather cover because I convinced Chris to shoot it in Scotland because he loved the location I showed him, and it worked really well for his story. So we moved it from the desert to a little bit more greener environment in Scotland. So because at that time I felt there'd been too many Hurt Locker, Benghazi, all the different genres of films filmed in the desert. So I didn't want Batman just to feel like another war film,
Right.
And it could have been very easy done because it was a military aeroplane and things like that. So we're just trying to keep that down. And then proficiency. So when we filmed it, we managed to get leaving the aircraft and the other aircraft underneath it flown by John Maloney from Planes of Fame in California, incredible pilot. And then we had 2 incredible pilots in the C-130. We were right on the edge of what in aircraft terms is called full flaps were on, and we were dragging it through the sky at the slowest speed we could do it.
Right,
110 knots, which
looked fast though.
Yeah, it's still fast. You're looking at like 125 mile an hour still outside the window, so and the performers were great performers, majority ex-military, special forces soldiers that who did the stunt, who are actually stuntmen, who ex-special forces guys who did the stunt. And then we broke it down into a couple of places, and then we had a real fuselage of the Banderanti underneath a Super Puma helicopter at 6,000 feet. So guys came down, got inside, and then we did the gimbal work with Tom inside and stuff like that. And we did it, in 2.5 days. And it's because we were efficient and we had enough prep time, and our prep time was not cut down to the minimum. So we ended up trying to prep and shoot at the same time. We had the safety.
That's crucial. Yeah,
it's crucial because we had huge safety levels, and I just had an incredible crew, really, and logistically surrounding that particular part of the shoot sequence, we just had a lot of really lovely, good people.
That's incredible. All right, guys. So our next clip here is with Keir Beck. He's been known for his work on Hacksaw Ridge and Mad Max Fury Road. This was just a insane interview. I loved hearing about the rigging side of things.
Yeah, it was a really interesting perspective. I feel like a lot of the time when you think about action, you think about the choreographers or the fighters, but rigging a super big component of it. And, the Mad Max trailer sample that you're about to hear always gives me goosebumps. It was such an amazing film, and so much of that film in particular rides on the visuals of it. There's so much visual storytelling. So a guy like Keir, definitely indispensable for that kind of an action story. And
I think you also mentioned that this was one of the first Oscar films that was nominated with the least amount of words spoken.
Yeah, and yet you still get such an impactful emotional story and such dope action. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, and it was crazy hearing like the behind the scenes about how George Miller was just planning this whole entire film like in his head. A lot of these images were just from his head, and he was just relying on the faith of the crew to execute the vision.
If it were anyone other than George Miller, you would have been running around saying, "Oh yeah, there's this movie about Immortan Joe and War Boys," and everyone's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" You'd be saying, "I didn't write a script, but I drew storyboards. Look at the pictures I drew," and it would not have gotten anywhere. George Miller, he's the man, though. He made it work.
Definitely. So, without further ado, here is our interview with Keir Beck.
It is by my hand you arise from the ashes of this world.
We are not things. We are not things.
Where is she taking them?
What was your relationship like with George Miller and the team at Mad Max?
Oh, fantastic! I mean, when you work on a film, especially an Australian production like that, it's just a great big family. Like George Miller is, he's just the most wonderful person you could ever meet, and you're inspired to do a really good job because he's just such an incredible person to be around as a person and as a director and as someone that cares for his film crew. So, when you're surrounded by people like that, you're inspired to always be doing better and well and making sure the project has a great outcome.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned also that George kind of put very little restrictions on what you could do. Do you think you could talk about how much, I guess, creative freedom you had with the creative process for like designing these stunts?
Sure. Well, I guess, once you're always going to stick to a particular glide path from the storyboards, as far as what the images they are wanting to capture, but as far as creatively coming up with the way to achieve that and to exacerbate and make it a little bit bigger and a little bit more sort of hectic or grand, there was. I don't think I got told once on the whole show to pull back or stop hiring cranes or stop buying miles and miles of rope. So for me, it was a private free for all creatively because I could just go for it. And I don't think I don't know if I'll ever work on a show like that again with that sort of ability to have a huge crack at it.
So George was just kind of like, just keep going. Don't stop.
Yeah. He was just like, he was just like, whatever you turn up with, we'll shoot. So I'm like, Roger that. I can do that. Yeah.
Damn. So like any idea kind of just got into the film somehow.
Yeah. All of the stunts that we rigged, I don't think any of them didn't make it into the film, which is amazing. Usually you rig stuff and you do things and certain things don't make it. But everything that we did was in there, which was fantastic.
Yeah, it all looks great. This is the single movie that I had to sneak into to see because I saw the trailer for it, all the stunts, all the action, and me and my friend just we had to see it in the theater on the big screen, and it was worth sneaking into.
Oh yeah, excellent work.
Oh, I believe you were telling me that you were underage at the time.
Yeah, still in high school.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Oh, well done.
Thank you. It was worth it.
And, yeah, I still look at it now and just wonder how the hell we did it. I really do.
Yeah, and I know actually during shooting, the lead actors were talking a little bit about how they weren't sure if it was going to come together. Like they couldn't see it in their heads, what George Miller was envisioning. Were you able to sort of see it coming together, or did you have any doubts about how you guys were capturing it on film?
No, I didn't have any doubts at all, or any sort of, like you would watch playback and see rushes the dailies and just witnessing, being on set, watching them, photograph the sequences. So for me, I kind of always just, and understanding the other Mad Max films, I could see, I didn't know exactly what the story, how it was going to cut together in completion, obviously, but I could see the story coming together, and I could understand the journey of Mad Max and Furiosa and what was going on. So, I never doubted that this is, when you're working on something that epic and that intense, you just know that it's going to be good.
Yeah, definitely. And it definitely was good. And then I have to go back to that flame-throwing guitar player again one more time. So I'm wondering, I know it was a popular Australian musician, Iota, who was up in the rig over there with the guitar. Was he actually playing?
Yep.
And did you have to overcome any challenges to rig him so that he would be able to actually play up there?
Yeah, well, he had a couple of doubles that would, and funnily, both of them could play the guitar. So not as well as he could, obviously, but Iota did do a fair amount of work up on the doof vehicle with the guitar playing. So, periodically he would be up there for, hours doing, take after take or shot after shot. And the whole thing worked as a real musical kit. Obviously on the, in the edits, they went over the music again, but on the day he could play the guitar, and it was pretty epic.
Our next clip is with Emmanuel Manzanares. He's been known for his work with the LBP Stunts Chicago YouTube channel. He's also worked on films like Logan, Gemini Man, as well as the TV show Iron Fist.
Yeah, I mean, his name is Emmanuel. I hear most people calling him Manny, so I'm going to call him Manny. I hope I've earned that right. If not, then Emmanuel, I apologize. But hearing him talk in this coming clip about Logan, again, such a fantastic action film, really centered around this relationship between Logan and Laura, and then hearing about how the action part of it really relates to that relationship that is core to the story that's being told. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I really loved hearing about his experience working with Garrett, actually, behind the scenes, and how Garrett was very adamant about action serving story.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And, of course, Laura, a fan favorite character in the X-Men franchise, hearing about how she's small and how that sort of aids to her fighting style. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah. So without further ado, here is Emmanuel Manzanares.
Hello? You gotta pay for that, right? Hey, come on.
Not okay!
And another scene that really sticks out to me is that refinery assault where you have the bad guys coming in and trying to take Laura or X-23. And just seeing Laura doing all these flips and crazy slashes and things like that.
Yeah.
What is it like choreographing or doing previs for someone who is just physically a lot smaller and shorter than everyone else there?
I mean, that was a huge challenge, because technically the character is supposed to be around the same age that Daphne was, around 11 or 12 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's again, someone who's trying to understand their body, but then, we would, Steve and I would be developing these moves with the team that were like people of our sizes, between 5'8" to 5'9", 150, 170 pounds. And then Garrett would be like, no, you fools, it's like this, And but it makes sense because you kind of forget if I do a movement, how does this little girl do it? But at the same time, exactly, Garrett was so big about using her size, her speed, the fact that she has, claws on her hands and feet. And even the reveals and things like that. When do we reveal the foot claw? How do we reveal it? How do we show her as opposed to Logan, who's a little more direct and straightforward, not just because of his experience, but also because he's older. He's not going to fuck around and do all these, big laborious movements because it tires him out. Whereas she's a machine. She can whip and dance and do all these things. So it was a big challenge to kind of find the levels, especially when they work together at the end. What are the levels? How do they set each other up that feels right? because also Garrett was big about at the end they shouldn't feel like this magically fully fledged team. Like, oh, they're working together. They've all of a sudden known each other for years. He's like, well, no, they've only known each other for a few days, but they also understand each other by now. So there has to be a teamwork, but it has to feel natural and it has to feel real, and shouldn't take people out of the movie all of a sudden because now magically they've teamed up. Like they shouldn't be doing this big Jackie Chan-esque fight, all of a sudden know how to do something like that because, whatever, they're the team up characters. It's like, no, they both know their missions. They should understand each other. And again, I think that was super smart of him to always keep it grounded, but always understand at what point where the story is, so each scene really has an impact, depending on where the story point is.
Right. And I know you already mentioned, it's crazy that this was Hugh Jackman's last X-Men movie. It was also Sir Patrick Stewart's last X-Men movie. Mm-hmm. His final scene being with X-24 coming out and having to battle Logan, Hugh Jackman, the real Hugh Jackman, I guess. So what is that process like when you're trying to choreograph someone against their younger self? I know you already mentioned the age factor in Logan. Is there some sort of real character or characterization that you're keeping in mind for that process?
Yeah. Garrett really spearheaded the idea that X-24 is an animal, right? Like if Logan is an animal, he's learned over time his animal instincts don't have to necessarily be taken literally, right? Like he's learned to be a person over time. And so he technically has a person's conscience. But Garrett was like, well, X-24 is literally Logan without any of that conscience whatsoever. A fully grown animal, that you think could be controlled, but ultimately is not controlled, right? The moment this person goes, they go. And because they don't have the weakness that Logan currently has, that's even more terrifying in that way. Once this person reacts and takes impact and things like that, he's not going to react like Logan, who's now older and can feel pain or can also understand that his body's not going to move the way it does anymore. So that was a big thing, setting up that scene. Like Garrett was almost saying, it should be like a horror film in that farmhouse. Like this person should come, and then once you see him kind of take out the farmers, you're like, oh shit. And then once you see Logan come and unload on this guy, and then X-24 just responds by impaling him and throwing him, it's like, yeah, that's it. This guy shouldn't have to do all these other moves back to him. He should just literally take the damage, get him, and just put him down. And then now he's on top of him. Now he's this unbridled animal force. So,
all right, guys. So our next clip and final clip is from Garrett Warren. Garrett has been known for his work on Logan, Avatar, and now Avatar 2, 3, the sequels.
Yeah, this might have been my favorite episode so far. It might be some recency bias because this was our latest one, but I feel like he was such a dynamic person and he brought in influences from so many different places. And you'll see in the following clip, he's talking a lot about James Cameron, and it takes a very martial artist sort of mindset to be humble enough to really give full credit where credit is due. And this is what Garrett does.
It's just insane to hear about Avatar, just because as a kid, this was one of my favorite movies. It was just a spectacle of a movie. And hearing about how meticulous James Cameron was about every detail of this film, it's commendable for sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing the movie in theaters, and it was me and another family with some other kids. And at the time I was pretty young. So once those blue Pandora avatars started making out, we had to leave the theater. And I was just sitting, waiting for the scene to end in the hallway, thinking, wow, what a crazy film this is.
Yeah. And I think Garrett also mentions in this clip, there is a lot of benefits as a director to know little things about everything, the way that James Cameron knows.
Yeah, definitely bringing all of those different dynamic experiences into play.
Yeah. So without further ado, here is Garrett Warren.
It just sounds like whatever you guys could think up literally was possible.
That's
with,
right.
With that technology, especially.
That's right. That's right. And that's how it's so good. That's why it's so good because, he didn't just shoot action. He shot all the action. Then he put it together in a story sense. And then he got rid of the action that just didn't make sense to the story and didn't, push it forward. So that's why it's so good. Whereas a lot of movies, you've just got to shoot as much as you can because you're going to have to just deal with it and edit. You know what I mean?
Right. It's better to have more than less.
That's right.
Of course. Yeah. And I know you mentioned James Cameron. I'm kind of wondering what it was like to work with James Cameron and what makes him such a great director. And I know somewhere else you also mentioned that he really makes you believe in the stories that are being told. How does he do that?
Dude, first of all, the guy's way beyond the scope of what my intelligence can handle, can fathom. He knows so much that I don't know what to begin to tell you. Like, he can walk into NASA and they can try to explain to him how this magnetic field is being held in the air, and he can tell them, oh, well, that's actually the Meissner effect. And they go, what? And then he'll start telling them about, the quantum physics. He knows things about quantum physics. He knows things about, don't forget, guys, he designed, I'm going to say that one more time so you guys understand this. He designed his own sub that went down further than any other submersible in the history of mankind to dive lower than any man in the Mariana Trench. He designed it himself. And afterwards, from what I understand, a couple of his designs are now being used by the military. Not for bad or anything like that, but just, for safety's sake inside of their submarines and their submersibles and so forth, The man is also, I believe he's a part of the board of National Geographic, where, he goes out and discovers societies and he explores different tribes around the world and archaeological digs. So the man is, so how does he make you believe it? Because this man knows more than any of us do. And he's done so much research that he says, okay, this could happen. There is a theory here. You know how Einstein would come up with the theory of relativity and how to, go back in time and so forth. And he's the same exact person. And he says, well, there is a scientific plausible fact that could happen. And then he'll come together with that, and then he'll put it into his movie, and then he'll strip that away and put some badass girl in there with a gun and make her kill people. And that makes you all love it and accept it and feel like it's real. So for a lot of filmmakers, they just say, okay, well, let's just pretend that the guy comes out of this tube and, he's been grown into a clone. Jim would go, bullshit. That can't happen. Now, if there is a particle accelerator, because, and then he'll start going into, there's a team at MIT, because of something he read in Popular Science, whatever it is, there's a team at MIT that have done, particle acceleration. And he starts getting into it. Then he brings that in and he says, okay, so then next thing you know, he's laid scientific fact into the fiction that is trying to be, created. And the next thing you know, you've got this reality-based idea that the whole world loves.
And I feel like as a director, people forget how useful it is to have extensive knowledge and experience about the world to just put into your films as well.
Yeah, he goes for the reality all the time, and he'll sit there and clear the set and just rehearse with people until he can get that reality down pat.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
True science fiction, not just using science as an excuse for this fantasy sort of a thing. Very cool. As a physics major, for me personally, I really appreciate that.
It's true.
So next step, we'll start making some submarines and then take it from there.
It's true. You're right, man. This guy is a genius, And there's times where he comes up with designs that are probably going to be, used in the future. So it's funny that there's a lot of things that he came up with that will probably be used on future, space flights and future things that you guys are going to see.
Crazy. And I wanted to also ask about Avatar, the wildlife specifically. There's whole sequences here that really depend on the different flora or fauna that's happening on this crazy alien planet. And for the action specifically, what was that creative process like when you're working with not just, people on people, but working with different kinds of fictional animals?
Dude, let me tell you something right now. You just opened up a can of worms, because he has books created on his plants, and the plants alone, he has dissected into their actual makeup. This one uses chlorophyll, this one, and I'm like, nobody cares, Jim. Nobody's going to know about these guys. I do. And I go, okay, I get it. And I'm not even sure what they're called, but he's got these names for these plants, cephalopods over here. And I can't remember some of the names, but, he has created these creatures, and he has based them on real birds or real creatures, and then he has amplified them up, and he's amplified them up in like this pseudo prehistoric way that is futuristic now. You know, so they are creatures that could possibly exist, and you watch it and you go, "Wow, this is actual." These look like they could live. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely comes through in the design, and then also just beat for beat in the sequences when they're being chased. Did you personally have any hand in planning any of that out?
No, I had the hand in executing it, but the chase was all Jim. I mean, let me tell you guys right now, what do you want me to say? I can't lie. That guy, he knew exactly what he wanted, you know. And on page, it says he's running and he falls, and he goes down a hill and he runs around a tree. And I gave him that, and he came out and he goes, "That's boring." I went, "What?" And he goes, "Nobody wants to see a guy run across a field." And I go, "Okay." And he goes, "They always have to have something in their path. He has to go over something, under something, around something, and then almost get caught. And he has to fall, and then the thing has to chomp at him, and he has to get inside of something, and that thing is like biting at him, and his teeth are right in front of him, and he repositions to try to get him again. And while he's repositioning, that's when he does something else."
Thank you guys so much for listening. That was everything we had in store for 2020, and we can't wait to show you what we have in store for 2021.
Yeah, we've said it multiple times before so far, but again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting the show throughout 2020, the most turbulent of years.
That's it for this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.
If you liked that, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/actionfilmmaking and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Stay up to date on the show by visiting our website, actiondecoded.com, and by following us on Instagram at Action Filmmaking Podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.